Okay, this is just kind of a confirmation vid that I'm doing on the ancient seaport that they found located at the Isle of Wight here across in Britain. And it's incredible dating, over 8,000 years old. And it's even bigger than they had thought before. People had gone to an edge and thought that it ended, and it didn't end. It seems to be many football fields. I'm only going to be able to show little portions of this, and Randall Carlson shows up also to confirm this and say some things, and I'd like to catch some moments.
Long, too. It's like many, many football fields. This thing could date.
Now they're showing this, and it's real hard to tell in this picture, but in the edge of this swamp, it is like a hook in, and it goes around and out. And it's like a bunch of football fields. You could build a golf course in this area, and yet it's a port that kind of goes all around it. I'm excited to get a perspective picture on what they think it eventually looked like, and then I'll do another one. There's liable to be some more information even coming out and things that they found, and what they're doing now supposedly is just off the dock, digging all down in the dirt and silt that's all up under there to find new things, because everybody drops something from a damn dock. And so there should be some things and artifacts in there that can even date this and give it a lot more credibility and stuff. But the place is huge, and it seems to be the oldest boat site ever built. Now, in my videos recently, I've been trying to tell you and show you about the earliest boats and how they go back much, much farther than this. At least twice this date, they have them on a cave wall drawn that they verified the date on. And they actually have one that they dated at 22,000, and once they finally dug it out, there's a boat on the wall there too. There's also a person riding a horse right there by that damn boat. I've shown it in my Kamyana Mohila vid that shows, and that's where that is. And they had dated it straight out. And it's got a mammoth on the wall too. And then they tried to balk on the date and say, no, that's not a mammoth, and we must have messed up earlier date. This isn't a mammoth, it's a bull and stuff. And then they just kind of dropped it, and you have never heard anything about it. I need to make another video about that, a little more presentation on it though. But I want to just go into this thing and the ramifications of what it means and what it shows us about ancient peopling and the people of Britain that were there first. Now, recently I've been talking a whole lot about the Scythians and how they come over and populate over, and that ends up making the mythology that came out of that. And pulling a sword from a stone was being able to use ore to make sword from a stone and things, and where that actually comes from. And it goes from earlier than Arthur and then gets pulled into it. That's a separate thing, but this shows you preemptive to that, and a few key phrases are used in here.
Back 8,000 years, right? That's a full 6,000 years before the birth of Christ. Well before anything like this was believed to have existed. What does it mean? Well, sites on land nearby are showing agriculture existed 2,000 years on the island before previously people thought it did.
Yeah, they're showing also a few things that are correlating just in this area right here, and there appears to be previous land clearing and in a whole area, and it's pretty huge. It again expands many, many football fields, and then there are separate plots of it and things that works off of this little river valley thing that they've got over here. But I'll do a separate video on that.
And now it turns out that people, human beings, were taking to the sea in these ships thousands of years before the pyramids were even built. Randall Carlson, he's one of our go-to favorite geological experts on this newscast.
And I love Randall Carlson. Now, just to give you a little background with me, with Randall Carlson, I didn't know he existed. And whenever I was researching all of the stuff to redo a video, 2.5 years ago, I guess, about ancient commentary impacts and the torrid meteor shower and how they connect all together. And I made a special about Halloween and how Day of the Dead and Halloween go with this torrid meteor shower. And sometimes these meteors make it through and bad things happen. And it's a remembrance, and it looks like it may have been, hey, it's a projection here, but that ancient commentary impact might be around that time. After I made the video, Bing, of course, just because I've been looking up stuff related to it, he pops up in the side, and he's got a little video that he's doing too on floods and stuff. So I check out his things on floods and stuff like that. I watch a few of them, and then now eventually it's popped up on the side. He does a thing about Halloween, and he's done a whole lot more, and I've seen him with a lot of the other people that are into this, and he's going to mention it, and Graham Hancock and things like that, and when it goes to it and stuff. Of course, he's got to give him a great show on his beard here. I mean, just really, he's about Santa Claus, and I think that's fantastic. But let's continue.
If nothing else, who could not love the beard? We could have him on for that reason alone. And
Hey.
he's good enough to join us tonight to share his. Why do you explain to our audience, Randall, what makes this such an important and significant discovery?
Well, it's just one more piece of this emerging body of evidence that keeps pushing the origins of civilization and organized social activity back further and further
Than previously thought. I'm sorry I cut in. I know I do that too much sometimes. I can't let too much of this go, or they'll probably try to flag it. That's kind of become my key tag here lately, because I've shown about, I don't know, 30 videos since the first of the year that talk about things that are much older than previously thought, and what we're taught in school. And that was easy to do, because in the time that I was taught in school till now, we have found incredible things, but yet my kids are still being taught what I was taught in school, and the variation there. So I show you that, but I always try to pick something new and something that goes with it that shows you how it all hooks together, and much more earlier than previously thought. Okay, let's go with this idea. This may be similar to yours, maybe not. You can write down in the comments if it's not, but whenever I was a kid, I was taught to believe that really about 3000 BC was just about it, and pyramids and stuff, and just before that, people were Ugg, and there was the Bible starting, and that's it. And everybody was Ugg, right? And then you find out about the Sumerians, and they predate it, and it's what the Bible comes from, and they date back to over 5,500 years in that area, really about 7,200 years for the preemptive cultures that come into that area and start the farming and everything off of it. And then you're told that, well, all they taught, they learned, and they've got all these things attributed to them, and that's like, okay, that's fantastic. And it all happened at once, boom, okay? And it's been a big oopart idea. I mean, they say God gave him the wheel, God gave him the plow, and all these things. And of course, with the Anunnaki stories, everybody goes crazy on that. But I've been trying to show that there is something before that. There's proto Indo European things that they found that are almost covered up and not talked about. And I've actually ranged it all the way from the last ice age to real close up, preemptive to this time, about 6,500 BC and even earlier, or even closer to our time. And showed you trade and things like that you can show that happened and went here and went there, like hemp for rope and stuff like that starts passing around. Now, until genetics came out, we were all about little shards of pottery and crap. And of course, you do get back in a culture where they don't have any pottery, and then you would know that that's really, ugh, here we go, right? But it comes out of that. And when is that? Well, a long time ago, they pegged that, 6,800 BC. Well, here's an 8,800 BC piece of pottery. What? Here's a 8,000-year-old boat dock that's huge. This is like frickin' Nantucket. No, this isn't like that little boat dock that your granddad has out near the little cabin thing. This thing is huge. I don't know how to picture it. I wish I'd just pull up a picture of a giant boat dock and could describe them whether or not it's the same. And of course, this is what I get from their little picture and their little thing. I want them to make that fake CGI picture, and maybe that you can 3D around it and say, look how big this is. key point in matter here, the reason they never found this before, and it was right there, is it's about 25, 30 foot below water. And that shows you that it was from the time of the sea level being actually lower than it is now. Now, it wasn't all the way down to its depth, so it was up, but close to it. And they're going to get better timing and dates from things that come out of it. Let's listen to Randall.
And the old models have recognized. So this, like you said, 8,000 years old. Some of the speculation is that it might have been a boat building site, which I find very intriguing. Controversial idea, but if they were building boats there, then that suggests, or at least implies, that we might be talking about a maritime culture here.
Yeah, it's a maritime culture, it seems. And, I mean, too many things point toward it. It's just odd, but why would you have a boat dock without any boats? Well, also, the way they make those stanzas, and I showed you in my last video, it looks like they're doing things where they might have been even using planks stuck into the ground, posts stuck into the ground, and bending boards around it and letting them stay so they could make bending boards and everything. Oh, by the way, I've been talking about reed boats. I've been trying to keep away from wood because reed boats, and the Egyptians made boats and they were lashed together with this hemp and stuff and everything too, but they weren't really trying to seal them with bitumen a little bit, but they weren't, you know, whee or whatever. Well, so when does that come about? Right in the first of Egypt, earliest dynasties. You can see it in the walls and everything. In my preemptive or pre-dynastic Egyptian, when I show you this and stuff, and connections to Sumerians and reed boats and all this stuff, and reed boats that have barnacles on them, hooked up into the bitumen from ancient times that been out seaworthy and been going. But this says, oh, there's some wood going on here. And this is your proto-Phoenician people too, in a way. And they were those great boatmen that you know about. But this culture spreads from here at a time much earlier than people have been talking about. And genetics, and we've been creeping up on it right here with how these people of these certain genetics come down into the Levant area, and they ended up being the Neptunes, and how that blends into what becomes Egypt, and the natural people that are there in the Horn Africa, Caucasians, that blend back into that and go back much earlier. And of course there's pre-dynastic Egypt, and people have studied that to go back, and Sumerians studied that to go back. Check it out, Europe. You thought, well, we always thought that because of the last ice age and everything cramped down, people were right at the edge of the Mediterranean or got shoved on around and into the Middle East and stuff. Well, they did, but not entirely. And I've shown you that there's people over there, and then these other people, which are real closely related, migrated over. Scythians, all these things happen, and they migrate back. And it's not just a one-time thing that happened on a Thursday, but there was a wave that happens way before when, another one that happens through that Trojan War thing that everybody knows about, and another one later. You know, yeah, and Sogdians and different people that come out. And then, of course, we know about Alexander and the crap, and then, you know, Mognol's coming down. But I'm trying to hold that off for a moment and show you, well, what did he get to when it all came up together? You don't want to put in the dent in the car just yet. You'd be like, okay, look at this car that all got built by all these people. Let's continue.
You didn't mention that the platform was found 35 feet under the surface of the ocean, so clearly it was being built when sea level was much, much lower.
35 foot. I'm sorry, I thought it was 25 to 30 foot. Oh, that may have been the little tide marker situation on float. But I was kind of thinking that their 5-meter float, or their idea there was, might have been with that or contained that in it. So, okay, it's a little bit deeper there, but 35 foot, that's nowhere near the hundreds of feet at the bottom level of it. But then whenever you had the Younger Dryas and it come back up, of course, how high did the water get and everything? And then let's try to figure exactly when this thing could have been above water. Apparently they're correlating it to 8,000 years ago, or 6,500 BC. Oh, and that one comes important too. I've got one coming about Mithras, and how that goes back much older than people even thought, and how this proto-Indo European thing that floated around, the Aryan thing that started it all. And no, it wasn't something that was later that they talked about, or in the India and stuff, but no, it's a preemptive to that entire situation. So if you want to give them a new name, you can, but it was really the ones that they were talked about and so on and what it relates to.
So this is just one more piece that is showing us that there's a lot more to prehistory than has been recognized up to this point.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was reading the story. You're right. Its thing was actually like a giant. It's not a boat per se. It's like a port,
Right.
a giant port, like the port of Miami or the port of Washington,
Yes.
or any of those is really what it was. It looked like there was a lot of activity there at one time that was rather sophisticated. And then I also Googled to see what was going on in the Earth 8,000 years ago. And what most people say is almost nothing. We were barely learning.
Yeah, we were barely learning anything. That's what you're finding out. And because people built with wood, if it doesn't petrify, you'll never know it existed. And whoosh, it goes away. Kind of like the idea of Stonehenge. They know it's surrounded by posts and all the things that happened. But they didn't know that until they did all those surveys and things about it. And then that gave us a whole new idea. And I remember when we were a kid that they were like, well, it may have had wood all over the top of it. Hey, they got the wood hinge thing and all that stuff. And yeah, so what was going on in this area. And, though we credit Stonehenge to this time, we also know if you really get into it, they talk about it having been half built and really a sun-circled situation, like is shown through all of this proto-Indo European people, and that they've even found off into Egypt. There's one in South Africa and around things, and these people had definitely got around. Let's just let it go.
How to farm maybe a couple of little crops. Beans is all they said we could do back then. We were still hunting. We had no way of creating ranches or domestication of animals. So it makes it sound like we really were in the boonies, but this suggests maybe we weren't. That's significant, right?
Yeah, it's real significant. Randall's going to say this after I do, but I just said something about horses going back much later than people thought, much earlier, which, yeah, okay, we go negative numbers. Much farther than people thought. Boats going much farther than people thought. It'd be strange to have somebody try to have this, wow, they had boats 8,000 years ago, that's before Egypt and all the things and everything, and go, well, some people did make it to Australia some 50,000 years ago somehow, and you can give them the idea that there was a big storm and a bunch of trees got knocked down, washed into the ocean. They did too, and one of them grabbed a hold of it and floated that way. There is a small gene pool there. You could try to pull that off, I guess, but somewhere preemptive to this, you have to realize that you're giving too many people, all the islanders and things, this idea of a floating raft situation. What if they saw that one time and then they started sticking them together? You'd have to give it rope or something to hold it together, like vines. Well, you could do it with vines, but you could do it with rope a whole lot better, and rope seems to go back too a whole lot. I remember watching Tom Hanks' Castaway, and I was just beaming on the idea that, that so you could do it now real easy, and you got it figured out and braiding and everything, but how long has this been going on? And you're like, man, people probably had braiding and trying to make things along that line way before, but you're never going to find that basket. You're never going to find that thing. You're lucky if you find a remnant in a cave in special conditions, just like fossils and stuff. Let's get Randall go here because he's got more important stuff to say than I do.
Well, yes, it's very significant, and some of these other sites that have been found. I was talking to Joe Ricci, the producer, earlier about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is a gigantic megalithic site. It's a series of many dozens of large stones, 15 to 16 feet tall, intricately carved, some of them. It was buried deliberately, and they're only now just excavating the surface of the thing, but the preliminary dating shows that it's at least 11,600 years old, which puts it, 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, for example. Yet the level of sophistication and the intricacy of the carvings and so forth on there matches anything that we would have seen from the later Neolithic periods or the Bronze Age. So this again...
So, he rolls over and he's only got a certain amount of time that he can speak. So, they're going to dedicate 5-10 minutes to this, right? Of course, I'll dedicate a little bit more. But he just mulls over that idea. But So there we are again, where I was a kid in Stonehenge, and yeah, it's about this old, and da da da, and oh man, around 3,500, and they're like going, no, it's 9,000. What? And we figured out this, the ice age was just ending there, yeah, and then everything appears like a lot of things happened out of that ice age, and there's probably a whole lot of not going on. And now we're finding pieces of it, and you have to make up things and conjecture that goes with it. But whenever you find something like a giant boat dock, it just, your light bulbs start going off, and it changes what we think of history. I was fixing to say it changes history, but changes what we thought of history. That's the reason I get pissed off and I say, don't say it's the oldest boat ever found, because somebody's going to find one day, and then you'll look like a fool. Well, you wouldn't have until that moment. Why don't you say the earliest boat ever found? It works off the tongue better, and it goes all David Attenborough with the way it works, right? Check it.
It's completely out of context. And again, it's pointing to the fact that there's a whole lot more to prehistory than we recognize. And I should point out that, you know, when we go back, when we hit 11,600 years, which is the date, the preliminary dating that's showing up on Göbekli Tepe, we're right at the very end of the Ice Age. And the transition from the Ice Age into the interglacial age that we're in now is generally dated at 11,600.
And there's the Younger Dryas event that pegs right at near that time, too. At 10,800 years ago, and you say, okay, well, this was going on, boom, boom, boom. You know, we're just lucky that they buried it and went through all the trouble of burying that. And it's amazing that they did when they decided to bury it and move on. And where'd they move on to? Well, they moved on to Middle Earth. And I've kind of talked about that too. So hopefully whenever you're watching just this and the talk that's going on, more of those threads in our web of how things worked and did come out are working together with each other. But it's amazing they buried it. If it would be totally long gone. Would we even find a T-pillar and have an idea that there would circles here, multiple circles? I mean, what would we even have an idea of anything? If they didn't bury it, eventually people coming by it would have used the stones for something, and we may never even realize that it was used before. And man, there's so much to little things like that, and you wonder, it's just like, you go, okay, well, but what have we not found yet that still exists, and what have we lost that we never knew we never knew?
Rick, at that time, there was a catastrophic rise of sea level. It's referred to as meltwater pulse 1B. And what's interesting, and this I think is an important point to make here, is that during the bitter cold of the Ice Age, one of the places that any kind of social enterprise or civilization would take root would probably be along coastlines, because that would provide some of the most benign environment. But
big point here, those ancient coastlines are gone. They're all underwater. Yeah, and I've led into this concept talking about whenever Bob Ballard, the guy that found the Titanic, is in the Aegean Sea trying to find a warship from World War II, and he ends up finding a stone circle, and it's down at, well, a couple of 100 foot deep, to where the only time that would have been exposed would have been way before the last ice age even ended and the Mediterranean got inundated, which catastrophically flooded over into the Black Sea and changed it. And that's where those proto Indo Europeans were living around a lot, a good portion of them. And that's where a good portion of that flood story comes around, and other people had them too, and it keeps sopping it up like a sponge, these ancient Caucasians.
Got to bear in mind that the coastlines of the world during the Ice Age are now beneath 300 to 400 feet of water. So I'm predicting that really the future of archaeology is going to be marine archaeology, and there are going to be a lot more amazing discoveries that are going to be made in the near future now that we're...
Well, the odd thing about that is that, man, whenever we
developing the technique,
whenever we dive, I'm a professional diver. I've been PADI certified and everything off of it. You could probably tell from all the saltwater stuff I talked about. And man, you can't get down that deep. Everybody going down that deep is going to have to be in a submersible using nitrox and all types of things. And decompressing and doing things. You'll have to have somebody maybe in a submarine that they can come out a porthole at the bottom of and do that, fancy Johnny Quest kind of thing situation. Of course, you're going to have to scan places and try to find things and stuff too. And hey, we ain't never looked at that point. Even when we looked at coral reefs, we don't go down to the point that ends. And so that's going to be the masking of it, is going to be, well, coral reefs were growing in the water, and then the water went way up, and so they started growing up close to the surface there. And so there is some slight covering up, but because it happens so rapidly, and it does go past the point that there is corals now, it's kind of too deep for them to grow and cluster up on the rocks and things. There might excitingly be some things that we could find, but if I was to describe how many miles of coastline we have, somebody said one time, now don't quote me at all on this, but if you were to take and go 5 miles off the coastline, but exactly hover the coastline and go around, not counting islands, but just all the major continents, that you go back and forth to the moon 3 times. So there's quite a bit of coastline to look at, but then there's got to be some areas that are hot spots. Hey, I bet we use some of those today.
Technologies to actually be able to see what's going on down there on the seafloor 300 and 400 feet down.
That's a fascinating thought. I'm glad you shared that with us. That's good. By the way, I was thinking as you were talking that we're always told that most of the civilization at this time was only being developed around the area around the Middle East. That's where we learned to farm. That's where we learned to be more sophisticated, domesticate animals, etc., etc. This is nowhere near that. Does it say that maybe the information about that may have been wrong?
Let me answer that real quick, but then Randall, of course, is more important. Again, I've got to hack this up, so I might as well do it at this point. So I've tried to show you the difference between that. And a lot of people are getting taught that just the Sumerians and stuff. And I tell you that much technology comes from there, and a large amount of it comes out of there. But really, it's the Tigris Euphrates that it comes out of, and that leads all the way up into Anatolia. And so you've got this boomerang, and there's this effect around the Mediterranean, and it leads to another river. That's the Nile coming down, and it has a different seasonal flood. And because it grows plants at a separate time than other plants do, that made the world go around for people in ancient times before they really got everything going. And no, they didn't say on a Thursday they were no longer hunter-gatherers. They went all the way through. People give a weird idea of it too, but they can't even realize that back in the time of the Old West and things, there were still hunter-gatherers. Sure, people even in Europe and stuff were raising cattle and doing everything like the cowboys, which I showed one recently in America are, but they're still hunting and gathering, and they're still hunting birds, and they're eating them. And you got to hunt that duck, and it's Christmas duck. Here in America it's turkey, but there it was always ducks. And you catch it at the right season, they come in. And then there's rabbit season, and there's duck season, right? Just like Bugs Bunny. But let's see what Randall goes on.
You mean Göbekli Tepe or the docks?
The docks in particular, but the whole notion that most of Europe was totally undeveloped and stupid, and everybody in the Middle East was already very sophisticated, if I can use those rudimentary terms.
And the same applies to North America. And we're discovering older and older evidence of older and older cultural activity in North America than anybody had previously suspected.
Yep.
So this is going into the Solutreans and things I've told you, and the Galt site that's around down here in Texas and stuff. And I've told you there's always this controversy, and a lot of people have tried to set them in a box to the side. Well, that box overflowed a long time ago. And recently, and oh God, did I put it out yet? There's this Willow Creek site that even the guys that were saying no stiff arming finally had to say, oh yeah, this one's 16,000 or more. That's the early date on it. And so, yes, before that Bering Ice Bridge, there were already people here. Then there's other places like the Calico site show 200,000 BC. There was somebody chipping rocks over here, and because we know now that Homo sapiens itself goes back to 315,000 years, at least in Morocco, there and around the Mediterranean. You never know how long they got here, but if 200,000, in 100,000 years, could they have spread up and gotten around on the Bering Ice Bridge in some way? That happened not this last ice age, but way before. There are periodic ice ages. In fact, we're due another one. And that's why I made that video about Al Gore being all wrong and man, bear, pig. Because you're showing all these things, and if you look at the pulses, the way it's been going, we're overdue to be dropping down real quick, and everybody's, my porridge is too hot, and watch out.
Because we've been throwing a plug here for Graham Hancock's book, America Before, where he really gets into some of the amazing discoveries of monumental earthwork in the Amazonian basin.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's that, you know.
It is.
Go ahead. We got 20 seconds if you want to get the last word in.
I don't know why they'd have something this interesting and have it cut off. What they could easily do is say, this is interesting as hell, and so that story about blah, 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 or that good luck story, we could push that on to the evening news or to tomorrow and make sure we fill things up. Don't want to lose it, but don't want to lose this, and don't want to cut it short. He cut himself short, though, because instantly, like I do in his mind, he went on a tangent. He goes, not only there, but in North America. But no, go back to not only there, also proto Indo Europeans and things, and this stuff that happened a long time ago, and where's the wheel and the horse come from, and all these things that had gone on. And I'll be damned, there's cowboys and there's wagons. Yeah. Yeehaw. One of the names of God was Yahoo.
Well, yeah, so he's talking very much about the discoveries of monumental earthwork architecture, very much like used to exist prolifically in North America prior to the arrival of the Europeans, when there were these amazing, huge earthwork structures and sculptures all over the Mississippi River Valley and the Ohio River Valley.
He's talking about mounds and stuff, and CFAPS has gone through a hell of a lot of them, almost to the point, because I was going to start doing it, and if you look at him, he's got 72 books on it, you know, and you're thinking about writing a book. And in other than doing a compilation and stuff, it almost seems negative, but then again, he's shown just about every one of them, and some have some interesting things about them. Some of them really have some standout objects and nobody talks anything about, and I've shown a few of those, and alignments and things like that that show that, well, this is the same that these people had over here, and even the stars they're lining them up to, well, it's the same sky, and you're like, well, yeah, but it kind of looks funny. It's a little bit, and these people used to build mounds, and those people build mounds, and we're all saying it's all Indians, but was there some interaction? Who were the people here before? And I've shown recently, they've shown a couple of finds and coming into and through Alaska that skeletal remains, DNA, and everything that are actually Proto-Indo-Europeans and not the Asiatics, and two mixed people too, one of which they claim hooks up to actually the Aztec difference that there is in Amerindians and South Americans too, and that contains a Caucasian component at about 30%, 28 to 30%, which is pretty neat too. Let's let him finish this off, and I'll say one more thing on the way out.
Now they're showing up in the Amazonian Valley due to deforestation, but also through LIDAR discoveries, which is the radar that penetrates through the vegetation canopy and sees what's there below in the landscape.
Well, I got to tell you, it's a pleasure to talk to you. It always is. It's fascinating. Can't wait to get you back, all right?
Yeah, I'd like to do more about Randall and everything. In fact, this year, maybe whenever we get into Halloween, which is fixing to come up, I'll do a verifier where I talk about my other video, and I'd like for you to see the ones I did last year about Halloween. I did a whole series where I went through where does vampires come from, where does werewolves and some of the earliest things come from, but hell, Halloween, Sam Hain, all has these people in different places had this thing, even in the New World, and their Day of the Dead correlates in this within a week or so of the same time. Well, it runs over that week, ironically, and that's strange, and it all has to do with Taurus, and so does the Mithras symbolization of stabbing the bull, Taurus, or the Taurid meteor shower, and that seems to be where it emanates out of. It looks like God's throwing fireballs at you from right there. And so it goes back to like that Mithra thing. And you wonder if people had it not even just into the last ice age, but even before that, that they were already having an idea about this going on. Now, it didn't have Mithra and everything all attached to it. That seems to go back maybe as far as 6500 BC. And it gets built into something else. And whenever I do the video on it and show you, it'll talk about it. But that wasn't everything Mithra, boom. But there was this concept back then. There was this Buddha type person, this Jesus type person, and this predates the Sumerians and the Egyptians and everything around there that it seemed to happen. And does it give credibility to the Arabs and everything? No, Mithra wasn't an Arab. All the people in that area at the time, and Mithra is an Aryan, and it well shows it and everything. So this is preemptive to that. So Aryans weren't on a Thursday at a certain date. They did all these things, and this is just one verifier of a lot of things that, what was I say, go back much earlier than previously thought. And you wonder how long till they get more information out on this and it becomes commonly known. For it really isn't known much on news stations, and they seem to shove it off a little bit. But you could see how excited that guy was whenever he's looking over there on the side, and then Randall started talking and his mouth shut as he was listening to all that information. But he's real excited about this. He didn't expect him to go and talk about South America, which that LIDAR and stuff, and I'll get into that. For they found a place, you know, the Mexico complex that's huge in Temple of the Sun? They found a place that's 4 times that size and has all this outlying people, and there was huge place, and this is the place that no one ever talked about yet. Was it El Dorado? No, I don't think that it's El Dorado, but it's a larger city. It would be like if you went and investigated all of Great Britain and got back through, and then years later somebody said, hey, in the Sherwood Forest there's London. What? Oh yeah, it's huge. And you never knew that you never knew. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, and enjoy, and we'll get on to even more of this. Appreciate you.